We live in a world of imperfection. So therefore, when it comes to our relationships, why do we expect everything to be perfect? Whatever the relationship is, family members, friends, children, particularly in marriage, every kind of situation that we find ourselves in can sometimes and oftentimes cause conflict. And at the heart of conflict are individuals involved in that relationship that are likely trying to insinuate, if not live by, the principle that you is not as important as me. I read recently that there are 5 different stages of people's conflict today: fight, wound, then they withdraw, then they repent, they feel sorry for what they've done, and then eventually they go back to repeat it all again. I'm afraid sometimes that's the way it is when it comes to marriage relationships. We get into such a turmoil because we feel like that we're not being listened to, we're not being validated, we're not being supported. On and on it goes in regard to the feelings that we have. I read about a couple that was having one of those discussions. You know the ones I'm talking about. They were not agreeing at all. And finally, the man, just in desperation and in frustration, he blurted out, "Honey, I don't know why God made you so beautiful and yet so stupid at the same time." To which his wife very calmly first gave her husband the look. Men, do I need to give you any idea of what that is? And then she said, "Well, God made me beautiful so you could love me, and God made me stupid so I would love you." I have an idea there are some women that just said quietly, "Amen." Involved in relationships are 4 simple little words. The first one should not surprise you. I. Because beneath every kind of conflict, whatever we're talking about, whatever variation you're dealing with, it boils down to somebody basically is wanting to be selfish. Have you ever heard the questions? What about my needs? What about my wants? What have you done for me? I'm not happy. I'm not feeling fulfilled in this, whatever it is. If I were happy, I would stay in this relationship. I like you, but I don't think I love you anymore. You see, that's the kind of phraseology. Those are the word pictures. Those are the phrases that are used by individuals that are coming from that perspective. It's all about me. Should it surprise us that the Bible warns us about selfishness? About this very problem that we all have in our relationships with other individuals? Luke chapter 9:23, "If any man will come after me, let him deny himself." You ever wonder why that's first? I think we know the answer, don't we? Because if I'm going to follow Jesus Christ, I always want to think about what it's going to do for me. And that's not what it's all about. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And I can just see someone saying, why in the world should I have to take up my cross? What about, oh yeah, Jesus, you've already taken up your cross, haven't you? Yeah. That's why we're having this discussion. But you see, that's the point. The very first thing, let him deny himself. And then take up that cross, and then you follow and do it my way, not your way. Ephesians chapter 4, walk worthy of the calling with which you are called, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long-suffering, bearing with one another in love. Now, folks that are coming from the perspective of me, myself, and I, they don't like that passage. Because what that very passage says is, instead of me thinking about how I feel, I'm supposed to feel about and think about how you are feeling. Paul continues that in Philippians chapter 2. Let nothing be done through vainglory or selfish ambition or conceit, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem others better than themselves. There's another passage we don't like. I don't even want to think about my mate. I don't even want to think about my family member. I don't even want to think about my friend that I've wronged and we're having this fight about. But that's exactly what Paul said we're supposed to do. Now, the context deals with Christian behavior. But folks, think about it. Am I not supposed to be a Christian in any kind of behavior toward anybody that I deal with in life? I don't know what they may be. I don't know where they're coming from. But as far as God is concerned, I am to behave myself as a Christian in every situation of life. Therefore, he says, let each of you look at not only your own interest, but also on the interest of others. Should it surprise us that in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1 and verse 2, Paul said, in the last days, perilous times will come when men will be, do you remember the first one? Lovers of themselves. In the last days, perilous times are going to come because men are going to be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, and on the list he goes. Any kind of conflict in life that we deal with usually is all wrapped up in what I'm about, which therefore leads to the problem of you. You see, that's the other side of the conflict. It's the relationship that I am to have with you. But unfortunately, I don't want to think about you. That's the title of our lesson. When you is less important than me. Because you see, in conflict, we oftentimes just want to be right. We want to tell it like it is. We want to let them know it. We want to, we want to not only get hysterical, we want to get historical. We would really want to list all those faults. And thus becomes the issue. Because you see, selfishness is blind, literally blind, to the needs and what the other person needs from us. You remember the parable that Jesus told in Luke chapter 12 about the rich farmer that God called a fool? He said in verse 15, beware of covetousness. For a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things that he possesses. And then he goes on and begins us the parable of that rich farmer that had everything. He had a bumper crop. And instead of thinking about anybody else but himself, he just decides, I'll tear down barns and build bigger barns, and I'll just have it all to myself, and then I'll say to my soul, so you have much goods laid up for many years, eat, drink, be merry. 13 different times in those 3-4 passages, he uses personal pronouns. It's all about me. It's all about it's all about who I am and what I want. And you see, here's the issue with you. We want to deflect. We want to blame. We want to point the finger. You ever notice when you point the finger, there's at least three fingers pointing back at you already? Not counting your thumb. But think about that. We want to let everyone else know of their inadequacies, their imperfections, their problems, what's wrong with them. And therefore, we don't want to in any way admit that we could be in somehow, some way, a part of the problem itself. You ever heard someone say this? You don't treat me right. Why don't you pull your weight? Why don't you fix this problem? You see, the way it works, if it's all about me, then the problem is never going to be me. The problem is going to be you. I don't guess it's genetic. But you know, when you go back to Father Adam and Mama Eve, they did the same thing that we do today, several thousand years later on. In case you've forgotten, God speaks to them in the garden after they sin. God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you hidden from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" Then the man said, "The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me of that tree and I ate." In other words, it's her fault. And the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." So it's the serpent's fault. And from that time frame then to this present day, we all are trying to blame somebody else instead of me. Conflict. I, you, they. We all know what a mirage is. It's something that appears not to be possible, but in fact, and that appears real, but it's not real. It's not even possible. Now, obviously, we think of mirages in the deserts. We've all seen the movies. We've all read the books about someone traveling through the Sahara Desert, and they think they see water, and they go and start drinking water, thinking it's water and it's sand and those kind of things. Think about it. What kind of mirages do married individuals, or for that matter, whatever the situation we're talking about, have in their life? One mirage is this: love is only a feeling. That's the belief that some people have. Love is just a feeling. It's just an emotion. It's just something that you feel, and therefore, because I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, I'm not feeling good about our relationship. You ever heard that before? I just don't feel this anymore. It's just not working. Well, folks, love is not a feeling. It's an action. Because biblically speaking, anytime you look at the word love in regard to the idea of you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, or wherever passage you want to look at, it refers to something that you have. Yes, it's an affection that causes you to go do something. So if we think that love is just a feeling, then it just sort of comes and goes, ebbs and flows, and therefore, because we can fall in love and we can fall out of love. That's that mirage that some people have. Another mirage that we've already talked about is my needs come first. I don't care whether I'm married to you. I don't care whether we're in this relationship together. It's first me, myself, and I. Now that's a mirage. That's something that's not real, but I'm afraid some people think that. One more, and we could turn to many others and think about many others today, but that is that we think that love and intimacy in a relationship will solve everything. Well, we're still having these conflicts, but intimacy is okay. It's going to solve everything. It doesn't work that way. Because we eventually get to the point of not only getting disgusted with that person, but also what we might do with that person as well if we're involved in a conflict that's real. Here's what happened in marriage or in other conflict situations. People that are struggling, people that are dealing with these headache issues, these continual turmoils in their relationships, look out over the desert and they think they find somebody that has what they think is a perfect marriage. And what do? Well, we compare ourselves to them. That's what we do. We look at someone that's married that we think has it all together, and we start doing what? Well, they have it all together. Why can't I do that? Well, I can't do that with you. So therefore, they begin to formalize in their mind, if I want to have a perfect marriage like them, then I've got to get rid of you so I can find someone that I will have a perfect relationship with. I think I know the answer to this question, but let me just go and ask it. If there is a perfect married individual in this audience today, would you please stand up? I'm going to go sit down. Okay, I thought I figured the answer to that question. But you see what I'm talking about? Every relationship in marriage, two people that are imperfect and they sin, and they get angry, and they sometimes may say something they don't mean to their mate, but they're trying every single day, every single hour of the day to love that individual and to overcome whatever they're dealing with in their way. That's the secret to marriage. It's something that you work on every single day. I read about a couple that they were in a grocery line getting ready to check out, and the female cashier was checking them out, and the couple were talking to each other, just back and forth about their soon-to-be 50th year anniversary. To which the young female cashier said, I cannot imagine in my wildest imagination ever being married to a man for 50 years. To which the older lady said very kindly, but yet very sincerely, well, I hope you don't plan to get married until you can. You see, in marriage, we have to work at it every single day. And what we really need to do is we need to quit comparing ourselves to people that we think are perfect, because after all, there's no such thing as a perfect marriage save Jesus Christ and his glorious church. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, now Paul's talking about in other kinds of ways, but basically what he's saying is, look, why would you yourself compare yourself to someone else who's also just like you? Because just by comparing yourself to them, you've not done anything. You're not wise in that regard. You see, in the context that was read a few moments ago from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, what Paul was saying is, look, you guys, you women and men, you got to get this together. When it comes to relationships, particularly sexual intimacy and marriage, you've got to remember, you're not in charge of the situation. Men, you're not in charge of your body. It belongs to your wife. Wives, you aren't in charge of your body. It belongs to your husband. Work it out together. Because if you don't, Satan is going to get you one way or the other and cause you great obstacles in your marriage together. So we've talked about me, and we've talked about you, and we've talked about they. One more concept. God? Now, how in the world does God play into conflict situations? Well, We know He's the answer to all conflict if we just do it His way. But here's the problem. Here's the issue. If you and I have this ideology that says, God, you're just not giving me what I need for me to be happy about my conflicts. If we place the blame on God, then we not only lose our faith, but we also got a problem with God, and that's never good. You ever heard this or perhaps read this somewhere? God should love me just as I am. God does not care. God's not listening to my prayers. He's not listening to my concerns. Where is God when I really need Him? Or one that I sometimes read on billboards, even here in town. God should want me to be happy. What's wrong with that? It all depends on how you define happiness. Because I'm afraid many individuals define happiness in ways that are totally inappropriate, immoral, and against His nature and His word. But you see, if I'm blaming God, if I'm looking at God as being the culprit but standing between me and my happiness, then folks, we're in trouble. We've got a relationship with God that's, if nothing else, is very much skewed. So what's the good news? The good news is this: I, you, they, God, they all play a part in resolving conflict. Regardless of what relationship we're dealing with, whether it's a marriage relationship, whether it's a family relationship, whether it's a friend relationship, whether it's even a relationship at work. And I realize you're saying, I don't know if it'll work or not. I don't know. Here's the way it works. I have got to become humble and honest with who I am. And instead of putting the blame on anybody else, the buck stops here. I think it was Harry S. Truman said. And it stops here with me when it comes to relationships that are not the way they ought to be in regard to what I do. I got to work on me. And therefore, when it comes to that relationship that is most important in this life, you become very special. I value you. I trust you. I love you. And that relationship just blossoms and grows and becomes everything that God intends it to be, because you see, instead of me blaming you for my inconsistencies and actions, we're now in this great relationship intertwined together. Is it any mistake at all that you read in Genesis chapter 2, after God made man and after God made woman from man's rib, that they realized that they were not clothed, and there was a reason for them not being clothed. And then God says, here's the relationship. You leave your family, and you become jointly bonded together and become one flesh. You ever thought about that? That's the way God intends relationships to be. And the only way that's going to happen is when I realize I can be just as much a part of the problem as I can of the solution. And when I start valuing you and making that individual, or whoever the individuals are, to be the people that are looked upon as being tremendously important. I'm going to look out and find people that I can mentor and learn from, that are my mentors. I'm going to look at individuals that they have it all together. We have people in this audience. Either they were married for 50 years or more, or some still are married for 50 years or more. Go talk to them. Go sit down with them and ask them. And they'll probably tell you very straight, yeah, we struggled. Yes, we had issues. Yes, sometimes we had discussions, however way phraseology you want to use. But we worked it out. So we look for them. And then God. You put everything where it belongs in the relationship it belongs in by doing it God's way. By putting Him where He needs to be in our life. This is not original to me, but I think it makes tremendous sense. If there is no God in O, there's not going to be any peace. But when you know God intimately through obedience to His will and faithfulness to His cause, you will know what peace is all about. I ask you this morning, what does God want you to do today? In your marriage, go home and talk about it. In your relationships with others, go deal with them. Deal with it one-on-one, first and foremost, and then go from there. In your relationships with family, friends, whoever the case may be. But then I ask the question, what does God want you to do today in regard to your obedience to His will to become a Christian? Do you know God today intimately by obedience to His will? If you've not obeyed as taught in His Word, you have this opportunity. Won't you come together? We stand and sing together.